Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Melissa Darnell. I'm with CoCreative, and we are welcoming you to this co-inquiry about white supremacy culture and systems change. I'm going to invite Russ to please share the brief slide deck we've prepared for our time together. I want to welcome the Academy Fellows, our colleagues, faculty, members of the Illuminate Network, invited guests, our CoCreative friends and clients, and everybody who is joining us today who are dedicated to the continuing dismantling of white supremacist structures and practices in our lives. We are whole human beings, and we invite you to this space knowing that many of you are working from home. We welcome your laundry, your dogs, your kids, and other folks who might be popping in and out of the screen today. We really are grateful to all of the folks from around the world who are joining us from different time zones. So please do what you need to do to take care of yourself as we come together. I want to let you know that we are recording this session, and we're really excited to be creating something together, which we hope will be a resource of insight and inspiration even after this 90-minute session is over. Our practice here at CoCreative is to begin all of our time together with a land acknowledgement. And so today, I say that I am joining from the traditional land of the Wintu people in what is now known as California, the unceded territory of nearly 200 tribal nations. Many of you are also joining the session today from a place that was occupied by Indigenous people who were forced from that land. I want to invite each of us to take a moment of silence reflection on that legacy, to honor the traditional people of the land you're occupying, and to reflect on what we can do and might plan to do in addressing past and current injustices toward Indigenous peoples. Thank you. I also want to acknowledge that because of your generosity, today the money that was raised for this particular session is going directly back to the land. And we'll say a little bit more about that as we close today. Now I'd like to pass it over to Marta from the Academy of Systems Change.
Thank you, Melissa. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Marta Cerroni. I am Italian, and I'm joining from the shores of Lake Mascoma in New Hampshire, and that is unceded territory of the Abenaki. And I just briefly, I've been in academia for some time, and that's could be considered the pinnacle of the expression of white supremacy culture. So in a way, for me, it's just a good time to reflect back and reflect in the moment of the organizational life that I'm living right now. I'm the co-director of the Academy for Systems Change. It's an organization that owes its existence to Donella Meadows, environmental leader, systems analyst, and she founded the organization in '96. And we work to seed communities of practice and learning to advance and shape ecological and social and economic well-being with a focus on awareness-based systems change. I'm saying these words because they will come back later as I will share a little bit. I should say that Donella Meadows is constantly a point of reference for me and for many of us, in that she has really thought about the mindset level as the level at which all the behaviors at the system manifestation appear. So drawing that attention to the deeper mindset level is very important. And so many of you might be familiar with the iceberg model or frame, or FSG's water systems change. They build on similar work from Donella Meadows in particular. And I would like to share this slide where we see the face of Donella Meadows, and there's something that I would like to read with you all. And she talks even more than mental models or belief systems. She also talks about paradigms. And she says, paradigms are the mindsets out of which the system arises. And this quote in italic is one of my favorite ones. There is an emotional investment in a paradigm because it defines one's world and oneself. So there's identity invested in paradigms. And so that's something that draws very close to what we're talking about today. And so I'll just stop here with excitement and just looking back at all the work that is being done, not only by Donella Meadows, but giants who are here with us today. So thank you so much, Melissa and all. A pleasure and an honor to be here.
Thank you so much, Marta, Melissa, and Russ thus far. My name is Luis Alejandro Tapia. My pronouns are he, him. You'll hear other friends of mine probably on this call call me Lou. And instead of naming all the predominantly white institutions that I'm accredited by, I'm going to share that I am a fat Black man with locks, a beard. You hear me now? Great. Right. And so I am a fat Black man with locks, a beard, orange glasses, an orange kaftan, and gap teeth. And I'm a commitment to transforming leadership and learning into spaces of justice, equity, and freedom. I also serve as a network doula for Illuminate. And so this and all of my work happens at the intersections of spirituality, justice, healing, and liberation. On this slide, you'll see the word illuminate on a field of illuminating yellow. Yes, it's an actual color, and it was the Pantone color of the year for 2021. So I'll take that as a sign, right? And Illuminate is a collaborative network cultivating the field and practice of systems change towards a just, equitable, and regenerative future. Right? And so we'll invite you to learn more about the ways you can engage with our network, but I'd love to move us to some more invitations. Thank you, slide controller. So I invite folks to find our breaths at this moment and connect to our bodies in ways that feel comfortable to you. I invite you to take a moment to pause and take a few deep breaths at your pace. And that breath will serve as a reminder that you are here. In a moment, I'll be reading from the words of Mickey Scott Bay Jones' invitation to Brave Space. And I'll invite you to close your eyes or leave them open and follow along as you also read the words here. What I also invite you to do is to pay attention to where your body is open to the invitations here and where it might feel tense, where you might feel some resistance. So I encourage you to be in your body and to feel where you feel opening, and to also feel where you might feel resistance. And so, Invitation to Brave Space by Mickey Scott Bay Jones. Together, we will create brave space, because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. And so with that invitation throughout our session, we also invite you to feel what feels natural and easy for you when it comes to these invitations, what might feel challenging, and ultimately what feels most important. Thank you.
So I'm Diane Johnson, and I would invite you to listen with both your heart and your mind to the beautiful poetry of Pearl Cledge. If there ever was a moment to change the world, this is that moment. That moment where everywhere we turn, the air is filled with the sounds of women weeping for their children, husbands calling to their wives, babies born into chaos and confusion, a world desperately in need of changing, a world filled with questions to which we must find answers that are grounded in our humanity, shaped by our compassion, and informed by our membership in this unique community of women and men and humans who accept responsibility for changing the world. And this is the promise. This must be the promise. We will not be the ones to break the chain.
Thank you so much to the group of people who are helping us hold this space today. And again, for those of you who are just joining us, we would like to get to know the rest of you who is with us today. So we're going to invite you to browse to slido.com, enter the code LIBERATION at the prompt, and you should see these opportunities for you to respond to these questions. First, enter your name and organization. Then where you're joining from today. That's a place where we can find on a map. Many of you have already put that information into the chat for us. Why did you decide to be here on this Tuesday after a holiday weekend? And finally, one value that consistently informs your life and your work. Give you just a few minutes to answer those things. I'm going to drop a direct link into the chat. And just click on that link right there and it will take you to slido.com. The code is LIBERATION. Here's the link again, slido.com, LIBERATION. Okay, we have Marian and Mason and Sonia, Maricela, Meg, people from Del Arte. Oh, that's in Humboldt County. Radius, Winnipeg, Canada, Informing Change, the Bold Bison Communications and Consulting, welcome. Canada, wow. The Columbia, United Way of Columbia, Willamette. Kate is here. Stacy, Rachel, Bill from Ashoka. The Multnomah ESD Boston Foundation. Black Space, welcome to you. Humboldt State University Library is here. Some folks from Green America. More folks from Canada. Too many for me to name. Welcome to all of you. Let's see where folks are coming from. So the Human Rights Measurement Initiative, welcome to you. People for Bikes, wow. Cancer Free Economy Network. Portland, Oregon, Ohio. Virginia. New Zealand, welcome to our friends from New Zealand. Pennsylvania. Bend, Oregon. Nova Scotia, Folks are putting in the names of the Indigenous communities where they are: Canada, Ontario, Eureka, California, Illinois, Manitoba, Toronto, the Blackfeet territory in Alberta. Welcome. Thank you for being here. From Bay Miwok land, from Victoria. Here's why you've said you want to be here, and we'll share all of these things in my post-session communications. Been using the work of Tema for a while, and there's no way to pay back. More learning to continue my own understanding. We have been examining Tema's work, Tema's values at work, and I would like to explore how they've changed. Working in racial equity and justice, to learn, to listen. I work in the health sector to continue my learning. Welcome everyone, thank you. To continue my learning. And these are all of the values that are bringing us here today. Love, honesty, justice, fairness, authenticity, co-creation, wholeheartedness, humility, hope, interconnectedness, lifelong learning. What a privilege to be here in this space with all of you today. Thank you so much. What we're going to do now is I'm going to spotlight Tema and a very special guest, Karen Proctor, who's with us. And they are going to engage in conversation together about the article, the website, systems change, what they're thinking about all of these topics. And then we'll have the opportunity to reflect on that with ourselves individually and also with one another a little later on in the course of the session. So these two women are going to introduce themselves to all of us, and I invite them to do that now.
Wonderful. Hi, Tema.
Hi.
So would you like to go first and introduce yourself, or I will go and introduce myself, however you want to begin?
You go ahead, please.
So we were challenged with introducing ourselves in a way that doesn't speak about accomplishments or any of those things. So Louise, thank you for modeling that for us in a powerful, powerful way. And when I thought about this, I decided, because my birthday was last week and I turned 58, to introduce myself by acknowledging my eldership in a community. And I've done this for a while, but I'm just going to say it in front of this blessed community, that I am an elder in the Black community. And I really embrace that wholeheartedly in all of the ways that I can work and be with younger people and mentoring them and guiding them and helping them navigate things that I had no idea we'd still be navigating since I was born in 1963. And yet here we are still navigating some challenges, but also finding hope in that navigation, also finding fellow travelers. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about bringing my eldership and all the accumulated wisdom that comes from the natural and the divine into this moment. So that's how I'm introducing myself to the community, because Tema, I feel very blessed to have met you and to be on this journey of getting to know you.
Well, I was going to say the same. If I can add a few things about Karen, I haven't known her that long, but I've known her long enough to know that she's deeply committed, very fierce, very clear-headed, very straightforward, all the things I really like in a person. So I'm very happy to be here with you too. And I will also claim being an elder. I am 69 years old and I'm astounded to be an elder, because I think what's surprising to me about being this age is that I'm learning more than I ever have in my life before. And I remember growing up as a young person and sort of seeing older people as kind of blank slates. I had no idea there would be this much nuance and richness and complexity and depth and pain and grief and joy, and so all those things. And I feel like I will just add that when we start to talk about the work, that my work now is deeply informed by my own personal experience. The last 2.5 years, I've gone through a very meaningful and hard life transition, and it's just broken me wide open. And I'm very grateful for that, because I feel like it's allowed me to see that love drives the work, and I don't think I knew that before.
So let's talk a little bit about that work. And the other reason why I'm here is because of you, and honored to be here as part of that. All work, all of us have our origin stories. And I think origin stories are important. They do root us and they do ground us. And I was trying to think of 1999-ish when this first paper was written and what I was concerned about back then. And the truth be told, I was living my life as a Black woman in America in corporate, where I was dealing with all of these things, but had no name for them, except for my lived experience and except for the experience that my very activist social worker mother kind of inbred in all of her activist-minded daughters. But what was that origin story for you personally? What was happening in the world around you that drove you to put the pen to paper? Now, your story is on the new website, and I get that, but there's something more personal than that. And I'd like to really begin the conversation with the origin story.
Sure. Well, in 1999, I'd been working with my mentor and colleague and beloved friend, Kenneth Jones, who died in 2004, way too early, for about 5 or 6 years. And before that, I worked for 6 years with another beloved colleague named James Williams. And with both of these people, we had been really immersing ourselves in trying to understand how white supremacy and racism operated and what role we could play in grounding people in a shared analysis about that. And that was really our task. And I had moved to the West Coast for 1 year, just as a experiment and as a break from my regular life. And Kenneth and I were doing work up and down the West Coast. So we had developed, over this time, we had developed a pretty strong curriculum. He had brought his from the Peace Development Fund, and Diane knew Kenneth then, which is so heartwarming to me. And I'd brought the curriculum I'd worked on with James, and we had merged it together. And we were just, it was a very creative and generative time. And when I was living in the Bay, I also had the wonderful opportunity to go and participate in a series called the Challenging White Supremacy Workshops, led by another mentor named Sharon Martinez, who still lives in the Bay, and was doing these incredibly thoughtful and rigorous workshops about white supremacy. So I attended those. And then the People's Institute, which was a longtime friend of both Kenneth and mine, sort of the grandparents of racial equity work at that time, based in New Orleans, were offering a workshop in the Bay Area. So I went and took that and heard one of the best talks on linguistic racism I've ever heard then or since, from a man named Daniel Buford. And so that was kind of the context that was happening around me. And then I went to a meeting, and I don't remember the meeting, but I went to something that was so frustrating. It was everything about it was frustrating. And what I remember is that I came home, and without any books or notes or anything, I sat in front of the computer, and the article just flowed out through me and out onto the computer. I don't remember thinking about it. It was just like, this bothered me. PowerPoint. Either or thinking. And so it was just like my stuff coming out. But it wasn't mine. It was, it's like I had been influenced and informed by all these people. And when I showed it to Sharon, she said, you can't offer characteristics of culture without saying what you do about them. So she's the reason that I offered the antidotes. And then when Daniel saw it, he felt he deserved credit for some of the portions that I wrote. And so I was happy to attribute those to him. And we put it in our workbook, and it started to develop a life of its own. So I I've never really promoted the article in any way. It just, I think people took it out of the workbook. One of the pages on the website are some of the ways that people have taken it and revised it and made it specific to their field. And I think it was just, I tell the story, there are a couple of stories on the website I hope people will read. One is the story of my initial meeting with Kenneth, because it was such a transitional meeting. It's called, I think, Saving a Life. And then I lost my train of thought.
You're meeting with Kenneth and sort of as part of the origin and
Right.
pulling together the
Oh,
work.
the people, I think that we were, my colleague Bree Carlson and I were offering these characteristics at a workshop of the National Lawyers Guild. And we put them in small groups, and one person from a small group went in the report back, stood up and said, well, actually, these are all the qualifications for being a good lawyer that we've been taught. And so I think it really caught on because it spoke to people in terms of, it's really helpful to be able, it can be limiting, but sometimes it's helpful to be able to name what we're in, the water that we're in, to name what's happening to us. And so that's, I think that's why it started to really speak to people, and people started taking it and using it in all kinds of different ways, which I think is really wonderful.
So you had that moment of clarity, and you came and you put pen to paper and spoke about it. But when you were doing that, were you thinking of an audience? Were you thinking about who would actually receive this message? And you had the anecdotes there in the very beginning, but were you really sort of as intentional? Because sometimes we can do things and not be as intentional as we all like to pretend that we are when we do things, because sometimes things happen in a way that feels like synchronicity. I was at these workshops and all this, and then, but who was the audience, and what were you trying to do or move at that point in history? Because now it's a historic thing that happened, right? So what were you trying to move or shape, or who were you trying to move and shape in terms of the history at that time, now that we have the vantage point of being able to reflect?
Right. Well, it's a great question. And I would love to tell you it was very intentional and very strategic, but I'm not a particularly intentional or strategic person. I'm much more intuitive. And I think the audience, if I had one in my mind, was probably the people that we were working with. So Kenneth and I were working with a lot of different, basically social justice organizations, social justice nonprofits. We were doing a lot of work with the Western States Center at that time, and sort of up in the Northwest. And so my guess is I was thinking about the people who came to our workshops, and my guess is I was probably thinking a lot about the white people. I don't think I was as clear at that time in 1999 about my responsibility as a white woman to work with white people. I think that came later. And I was learning so much. I mean, I was 10 years in, I was a decade into this work, a little bit more, and I was just soaking in everything and just soaking it in and then trying to offer it back out. And so, my name is on the document. I don't think of it as my work, though. When people talk about it as Tema's work, it's not my work, it's our work. I mean, it was informed by everybody that I was in community with then, and I just happened to be the person that wrote it down. And that becomes, that's another part of the way that white supremacy works, is the person who writes it down gets credit when it's really the intelligence of a much wider and broader community. And so, one of the early version, I put Kenneth's name on it, and he got really angry with me. He said, I didn't write it, take my name off of it. And we argued, and he was my elder and my senior, and and I was not going to disobey what Kenneth told me to do. So I took it off, but luckily for me, there were lots of versions going around with his name on it. So some of those still have his name on it, and I'm thrilled about that too. So, it's yeah.
So thank you for that, because I think that's helpful. I think there's also, for those of us that are in community right now and listening to this conversation, and I invite you to use the chat to just share insights as they come up, because there's even takeaways that I got from that moment of having the moment and writing it and not sitting on it and not allowing it to be a moment in and of yourself that you suppress, but to go ahead, because you never know how that one moment will just transform and transition your life as well as the lives of others. Because to pick up the writing
Tema, to pick up what was gleaned from all of those experiences actually had an effect on those of us who picked up the work later and were able to see something expressed that they had experienced time and time again. And in settings, I wasn't working in social justice, I was working in corporate America in different industries. I wasn't in the work with the people, but I was experiencing all of these things and characteristics that were named. And they were named very differently from what I grew up with and what my social worker mom talked about and what I read in Baldwin and Hughes and Giovanni and all the texts that I was surrounded by. So it was something to actually have something named by a person living in a different experience than me. And now you're at a stage, here we are in 2021, in the craziest, bizarro world that we could possibly be in. And here this work is again, now evolving to this moment. So can you talk about this new evolution, or not new evolution, but the evolution of the work? What is inherently different for you now as we are older in this space, as an elder in this space, and as someone who's watched social justice go through transitions and the topic of white supremacy take on a whole new kind of, I'm going to say elevation intentionally in our times. So what is different now? What's different about the work? And why does the website, and I know it's more than a website, why does that matter now to you personally?
Well, you know, the article has been in circulation for 20 years, and I knew sort of just from hearing from people that it was in pretty wide use. And then when George Floyd was murdered, and there was such a spotlight put on racial equity work and racial justice work, it started being used even more. And I realized that that it really did need to be revised and added and updated. There needed to be a class lens. We needed to talk more about the intersections of white supremacy and capitalism, white supremacy and Christian hegemony. I mean, the nuance needed to be there. I heard a lot of stories about people using the list as a weapon, you know, so to beat each other up with. And I wanted to ask people to avoid using it that way. I don't think that's the purpose of it. And I wanted to I wanted to make it more nuanced, and I wanted to help people with the stories and the poetry, not just mine, and other people's contributions, to understand the nuance of it. And that you know, as a white woman writing about this, I have a perspective, and I have an experience, and I don't want to make myself small about what I know, and there's a limit to what I know. And so wanting to bring other voices in to expand on it and help us all think about it. I want to be really clear. I'm not, and I say this on the website, I don't consider myself an expert. I don't consider myself the last word or the first word on white supremacy culture. What I know is I wrote an article that seemed to speak to a lot of people, which gives me a responsibility to try and allow that article to expand and shift in the way that it needs to, based on my understanding of how things have changed. And I think, I mean, that we could be talking about this for hours. I think so much. What I will say is that when Kenneth and I were working together, and when James and I were working together, we focused a lot in DR Works. Our frame is this, that racism is institutional and it's cultural and it's personal, and these things interweave. And Kenneth and I focused a lot on institutional racism policies and procedures, and then we started moving to culture and understanding that if you don't change the culture, the standards and the values and the beliefs, then you can change all the policies you want, and nothing really changes. And we see that in our national landscape. And I never really paid much attention to the personal side of it. And now that I'm older, and I'm sort of seeing the way in which so many of us are in pain, so many of us are confused, so many of us are leading from places of trauma and sometimes ego, and that we all have a lot of personal work that we need to do in order to help ourselves and each other get free. And to me, that means to get free of our conditioning by this culture. So that's kind of the progression that I'm on. And I I don't value any one more than the other. I'm just talking about where my interests have moved over the years. And so I feel like my contribution now is to help to hold us, those of us who are practitioners, activists who are doing this work, to hold us to do the work that we need to do so that we can show up really powerfully and with deep love that is not anemic, doesn't erase people, it doesn't bypass anything, but it's grounded. So
I want to.
But I want to ask you a question too.
Sure. Yeah, after I ask you this question, it stuck. It really, the coming home to who we really are. So, you know, in white supremacy culture, and then full stop. 1999. But now there's this extra language, coming home to who we really are. And I would love for you to just speak to that for just a moment, and then
I'll ask you a question. Okay. Yeah. So the way I understand white supremacy culture is that it's the water that we swim in, and so we are informed by it. We're not defined by it, but we are all, every single one of us, deeply informed by this culture that we are growing up in. And this culture, the purpose of white supremacy is disconnection, deep disconnection across lines of race, disconnection within racial groups, disconnection of ourselves from ourselves, disconnection with the divine, with spirit, with creativity, with whatever you call it. It's disconnection. And we live, and the evidence is all around us that we live in a very disconnected nation, or larger globe even. So when I think about the project of dismantling white supremacy culture, or divorcing white supremacy culture, I think about that, and coming home to ourselves, I think about the work that we need to do, which is collective work, is to know our conditioning so that we can be free. And this is Lama Rod's language, Lama Rod Owen's language, so that we can be free from that conditioning, which allows us to be who we were meant to be, both as individuals and in community with each other. It allows us to connect. It allows us to understand that we all do better when we all do better. It frees us from the contraction. That white supremacy culture is a project of hate and contraction and fear. And getting free is a project of love and liberation, and and the ability to understand that we're all in this together, in a very without erasing the very profound differences that we have based on our lived experience. So I want to ask you about how has this shown up for you in terms of what have you found, or what are you learning about white supremacy culture in your work with systems change that you feel like is important and really on your heart and mind these days?
Well, I will say a couple of things. So I don't consider myself, like our colleagues who have joined in this community today, as an expert in systems change. Just not. I don't really consider myself an expert in much of anything, which has helped me a great deal. It keeps me very humble, and it always keeps me sitting in the seat of a learner in every space that I am in. So if I'm an expert at anything, I'm an expert at learning. Toward that end, for the last 30 plus years, I've spent a good deal of time really as a social designer. And I say that intentionally because that's my discovery of all the gifts and things that I have. That's what I use to do that. But there's a commonality when you study things and you start looking at systems change and social change, and you understand that the things that people want to do very easily, and white supremacy culture, check the box and get it right and get it perfect, are things that are very, very deep work. They're deep work because human beings have decided to place a hierarchy on human value. And anthropologically, it's just that it is that way. And it's that way, and it's been that way for a very long time. So say my anthropology friends. And so undoing some of the harm that is done there, it takes more than the toolkit, the checklist, and all of the things that we've become very accustomed to. And because my trade was honed in a corporate setting, corporate settings abound with these things because we have to measure everything and have to have a return on investment. And I would sit in meetings with wonderful people who do wonderful things and sit and like, really, is there a checklist for this condition that I'm seeing Black people suffering in? Because I don't think so. My mother didn't have a checklist, and she was a psychiatric social worker who was working to undo a lot of the harm that was done to her clients and the people that she cared about. So for me, it's always been about these things that people are newly discovering in terms of systems, that people matter and our mental mindsets matter, and how we view ourselves and others really matter. And so exactly what you said, unless we're working on all of these levels, on the very deep and personal level, to deeply interrogate one's point of view. Why do you believe what you believe? How do you believe it? Are you congruent to those beliefs? What are you really committed to? Because I come from an ancestry of very committed people who, under-resourced, changed the world in which we live because they always knew that they were human, and they always knew that they were fully alive and wanted joy and wanted life in ways that a society and a world told them that they could not be or have. This is my ancestry. This is what I inherited in my DNA. So for me, that was nothing new. Oral language and communication and expressions in different kinds of ways were how I grew up and what I was exposed to. And so getting to that very core human level of conversation, of dialogue, of understanding. I have a mixed relationship with the word empathy because it depends on how people use it. Because I think empathy is really, really difficult unless you've had experiences that are proximate with people. So that, when you're looking at, the underwater or whatever the jargon is around systems change and all of that, that's not surprising to me. That's always what I've experienced, particularly working with communities of color in the kinds of social change that they want to bring about. I have to know that community. They have to know me. We have to know each other. We have to understand who we are, what we value, why we value it, and where we want to go together before we can even get to those other layers of what are the policies and what are the practices. Because policies and practices can change, but if I still don't see you, if I still don't acknowledge you, if I still don't care about you, and to me, what are deeply human ways, then we're just checking the box, and we allow for what is happening in our society to continue to happen. Because here we are again. My parents died in the 90s, mid 90s. And I think about what they fought for. And here we are again. And my daughter is 34. She's about to be 34. And I spent February to May fighting for her life because of inequity in healthcare, because she was a Black woman in a hospital that no one listened to when she told them what her pain was and how her pain felt and that it needed to be addressed. So all of this is very real to me. And it's the combination of the lived experience and then the practice working with groups all around the country and particularly in Haiti, and understanding that it really does come down to you and me and us deciding that we want a more fair and just world. And for people who are more academically minded, that might sound very simple, but I don't care because I'm an elder and I know that it works.
Yeah, the great thing about being older is we can.
I just don't care. Yeah.
So I hear we have 3 more minutes. What should we do with our last 3 minutes?
I think we should talk a little bit about where this work goes and what your heart is and what your intention is for your work, and what you would like to see out of gatherings like this, and how you hope people use the connections and the resources being provided.
Well, I'll say that where I think I'm headed in the next period of time is I'm really, really focused on working with myself and other white people for us to understand our direct stake in racial justice. And I think I'm becoming more and more aware. There's a wonderful public theologian named Ruby Sales who says that that white privilege is not, that whiteness is not a privilege, it's a death sentence. And I actually agree with her. I mean, I think that the bargain that we make to join whiteness, and we don't necessarily make it intentionally, but it's made for us, for some of us. Some of us embrace it heartily, and some of us aren't even aware we've been invited. But that bargain to internalize the idea that we're both better and normal, that we define everything, is I think has resulted in lots of material benefits for sure. And the psychic cost is too great, and it's too great for us, and it's too great for all the people who are targeted by the systems that we are reinforcing with that ideology. So I think just trying to help myself I think I'm becoming more and more clear about that, and trying to work with other white people to become clear about that is where I think I'm headed. And also, you'll see on the website, there's a page of racial equity principles that we developed at DR Works in the last, after Kenneth died. It was the group that I collaborated with for the next decade plus. And I'm finding those to be incredibly useful. I use them every day, at least one of them every day. And so I think I've spent a lot of time talking about what's wrong with the white supremacy culture characteristics. I'm ready to start talking about what I know, or what we know. Again, it's not me, what we know supports us as we do racial justice work. So I want to dig a little bit deeper into those. I see another website in my future.
And it's just to remind everybody that's in the community right now that we are all part of these systems. And if we really do want to apply what we know, then change is possible. And I know that because my ancestors demonstrated it, and they demonstrated it with less than we have.
Mm-hmm.
So if we really use what we know and what we have together collectively with all of you, then the transformation and the just society that we hope to have is not only possible, it's in due time. And we hope that time is now. So I enjoyed this conversation, Tema. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hey all, this is a moment for a few practitioners in the field of systems change to make some connections between the paper and what's in the website, and how those characteristics have shown up in our work, and maybe how we've addressed them to some extent. So I think we'll hear from Marta, and then let's do Diane, Luis, and me. So there's a little bit of testimony here, Tema.
Thank you, Ransom. Well, it's a great place where to start. Just still reverberating what we just heard from Karen and Tema. So I will take an organizational lens, because Educating for Systems Change, we are in a process of rethinking how we want to be together as a community in the world. And so I just want to share that the characteristics of white supremacy culture were essential to inform a dialogue across all the different communities that we are together. And so internally, we really benefited from having a language. And of course, what happens when a white dominant organization goes through the checklist, you recognize a lot of patterns, right? Check, 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 check. And so so how that has informed our conversation? Well, it has helped illuminate some of the difficulties and the harmful patterns that we lived through in the past years and decades. And one of them, it has really informed the notion of who belongs and who doesn't belong, especially around the pattern of perfectionism, or the view of who is an expert, and so this has implications for the whole field. So we were having an internal conversation that lasted a whole month, uncomfortable as it was, and beautiful as it was. And, our organization was built or was practicing around the predicament of awareness-based systems change, and kind of realizing that the biggest unawareness that we had was around, white supremacy culture characteristics in particular. So maybe I'll stop here. I just don't want to take up too much air. But I just want to reflect on the dimension of the field of systems change, oftentimes benefiting, having to benefit from this deeper dive and what it means to be aware in all these other dimensions. I'll stop here, ready to jump in as needed and desired. Thank you.
Luis, do you want to go? Or do you want me to go?
Yeah, Diane, you can please go.
Okay, so for I don't even know where to start. So I think the first thing is to just, what I'm noticing is how many colleagues and friends and actually beloveds are on this call, right? And I don't think that that's an accident, right? That it speaks to the community of those of us who are doing profound social change work in all the different ecosystems and all the different landscapes that we are at. Right, Tim, I think I think about even how I got onto this call, fact that I used to, work with Ken, worked at Peace Development Fund, there's something about purpose and following purpose, like that, almost that unintentional aspect, of my personal experience. I and the context that I work in is at this intersection of spirit and faith and systems change and profound social justice and systems change work and structural change, right? And so it's not, so my personal belief system is that I and everyone else is walking and doing the best that they can under the circumstances with the resources that they have, right? And what I think is so, like there are probably thousands of people. I know that there are thousands of people that I have explicitly referred them to the original article, right? And the power of the article is that it invites those of us who are curious, that are learning, that are frustrated, that are trying to figure everything out, that it asks us to explore the systems and the culture, right? So all of a sudden this, because I think, again, culture, water, what the air that we're breathing in, right? And people, I think many folks just think that it's, isn't that the way it is? And it's like, no, it isn't. They are constructs that have been created. And so the use and the power of the original article and why it is so still so profoundly relevant now, and I'm so excited about the update, is that it serves as this exquisite entryway, this doorway, this access for individuals that are in communities, that are in organizations, to all of a sudden go, I never thought about it that way, right? Like it's like the quote that Russ mentioned in the chat, like, what's water? What the hell's water? Right? And so there is, and I think for those of us who also do systems change work, we know that the level, I think it's so fascinating, the level of resistance that I have encountered as a consultant when we start asking people and start articulating and pointing out aspects of white supremacy culture, right? And the power of the evolution of how we now can talk about systems, right? Because I think 20 years ago, we weren't that default of acknowledging the power of systems and structures were not the case. And now what we have in this past year, these past couple years, but definitely in the past year since the murder of George Floyd, you know, we are now the day after the centennial of, you know, the burning of Black Wall Street, right? The fact that there's now a level of analysis is a reflection and a testament to the evolution of our work. And this power of understanding. I mean, I use the metaphor of the Petrushka dolls, the Russian dolls. The smallest doll is us as an individual that then is in a family, and you know, and that there is, to get to the smallest doll and to get to the largest doll, you have to unpack them in both ways, and that we are finally seeing the intersectionality of what of this toxic system of white supremacy. And I'm probably out of time, but Tamara, you use the word anemic, right? And it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes by Martin Luther King about the relationship between power and love, and how do we create and address history, and that it has to be the intersection of love and justice and power, and how important it is that we, in the work that we are doing, that we are looking at the relationship between love and power. I'll stop because I could go on for a while.
I'm here for it. I mean, you could take up my space, and you can just, I do want to hear you share.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I'll make sure to leave some time so that does happen. I really do want more of it. And I do want to connect to many of the things that you were saying, especially the power of naming what is, right? And I think that as a person that is a racial justice educator, an equity consultant, you know, I was one of those folks that people scrambled and called last year to be like, help us be less racist, right? And also a person that I think was a witness and, you know, you know, in the front lines of when folks were really resistant to define these terms for themselves and to think of what else is possible. And I want to name that actually in my work and my experience is where I've encountered the most resistance, right? Being able to imagine what else is possible. And so, you know, with the work that you had done, and also with this new website, I think it's supporting the naming what is. I think a lot of the work that I was also doing with folks was, you know, naming what it is that we don't want. And I think there's also power in naming what it is that we do want, right? And so we know that we want to move away from these characteristics in that they are controlling, they are dominating, they are oppressive characteristics, and also being able to imagine, radically imagine what it means to move towards what we want, right? Which is equity, which is justice, which is liberation. And so in that stream of naming what you want, it wasn't until recently where I named myself and allowed for folks to name me as a person that the systems change, right? That name of systems change, where I know, Timo, you're also like, I don't know about what that is and all that, right? Because before this, it was community organizing, it was youth development, it's community building, it's movement work, right? And still, I see that there's a separation because of the names, right? And so I think this work and this website allows us really to look deeper at what is, and also to kind of think about what it is that we name ourselves and for what, right? Yeah. And so I'll pause there.
Thanks, Lou. So I could probably walk through a roadmap of my life and share a story about each time I became aware of my bias toward one of the characteristics on Tema's list. Unfortunately, I only have like 2.5 minutes here, and probably not ironically, I'm feeling a sense of urgency. So I was familiar with the fact that there was such a thing as white culture, not just because I studied sociology and anthropology, but knowing Judith Katz and her early work on white culture, as in if aliens landed on this planet and they looked around and they said, hey, look at these white people, how do we describe their culture? That, I was familiar with that. And actually from this paper, I guess you could say the paper that came from and through Tema and others to get the attribution just right. It was really powerful for me as an explicit naming and kind of sense making of my own evolution. So in many ways, my own path has been around, it's all about collaboration. How do we work better together, especially on these really complex systemic challenges? And I was seeing how these ways of knowing, being, and doing were really interrupting the work. They were just setting people back in the work. And so my own path in many ways has been about unknowing and unbeing and undoing in order to, in a way, access something greater. So in the context of collaboration, which is my obsession, one of the dominant ways are obvious, like the way we favor the parts over the whole, or, we had to get right off, we have to address the individualism and the idea held by so many leaders that they're the only ones who can address the issue, or their solutions are the right way, maybe the only way that can achieve success. And then other characteristics, as I looked at that list, it's like, these are things I have to accept in myself, and more importantly, kind of gain the courage to address. So in service of the work, I had to deal with like my conflict avoidance. I like to be a nice person. I don't like to be in conflict with people. I just want to get along. And then I'm defensive when I get critiqued or criticized or whatever. And finding the wisdom in the conflict and the generative power in both that and thinking, for me, has been transformational. And then I also found like my own preference for structure and order and perfectionism. Like there's an ideal solution to this problem if we just find it. And I saw how groups were getting completely stuck in trying to get things just right, trying to get the optimal strategy before moving into action. And now we help groups turn around when they're stuck in that situation. But in the past, I was the one who was contributing to that, like getting stuck in my own perfectionism and trying to get it right before moving to any kind of meaningful action. And then, as our team at CoCreative developed more and more effective approaches, then this idea of being big arose, like scaling up the work, having more impact in more communities, harnessing more resources and doing it all really fast, right? And in many ways, like we had to see that and realize the problems and limitations in that. And so now, at least I'm thinking of the work more as, how do we create the conditions in which whole people can show up as their whole selves? All of us bring our heads, our hearts, our hands, our spirits to do the work that's right in front of us and to just stick to it for as long as it's needed. And that's what it comes down to, at least at this point in the journey.
Russ, can I say add one thing?
It's hard not to respond to every single.
I know. I'm like, ah.
Oh, I know that list inside and out. Because I lived it.
One thing that I think that is implicit, but I think that we need to be explicit about is, and this might be Tema about the antidote, and you mentioned this, that it's about relationships, right? That the antidotes to all of the characteristics that we are fighting individually and organizationally and structurally is, and it speaks to David's question about disconnection, right? And the benefit of disconnection, that the antidote to the disconnection is about that we have to profoundly preference relationship, you know, above, and it speaks to also the power of what we do individually, because relationships begin at our individual level, right?
Yeah. And I think that's really shifting in our field that we call systems change. It was very diagnostic in the past, and now it's much more, we need to get people in the room making sense of things together. And that's a profound shift. I want to get us into groups. I think Melissa's going to invite us into something here. I'll share my screen. We've done a fair amount of talking, and we want to make sure everybody gets to share what's coming up for them. Melissa?
Yeah, so I'm just setting those up here. We're going to invite you to go into breakout rooms now that you have heard this conversation, and there's been so much rich reflection in the chat. We're hoping that you will go together, speaking of relationships and centering relationships, into the groups that I'm preparing for 3 or 4 folks. And we are going to invite you to share your name, what's emerging for you as a part of this session, what you will be taking away from this conversation, and then be prepared to perhaps bring something back to the whole group. We want to have a chance to do that after you are together for about 10 minutes. So I'm going to open those up now, and please accept the invitation.
Melissa,
when it pops.
Before we do that, sorry, let me just drop the prompts into the Zoom chat so that folks have those.
Sorry, Louis did it.
Oh, they are, okay.
Yeah.
I want to just note that we're here if there are any challenges that come up in your group that, you know, any problematic disruption or whatever, we're here to help. Okay, so you can come back to the main room.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, so invitations should have appeared on your screen. Please accept those, and we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes.
Welcome back, folks.
It's 6:30 in the morning in New Zealand.
Oh, wow. Good to have you.
I always hate the boot. I always hate the boot. We had an interesting connection because Kenny is in Tigard, Oregon, and we both worked in housing government together. I don't know if you planned that, but then Kenny and I think it was Jason, or I can't remember, I'm managing my kid on the back end. They have a shared friend, even though he's in Spain.
Nice. We had too many people to plan anything in these breakouts, but I'm looking for Diane. Diane, are you here?
Yes, I am. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we have less time than we expected. We were thinking of just inviting folks to share any final highlights in the chat, because we have some acknowledgement to do and some other closing. Does that make sense to you?
Yep.
All right. Well, yeah. So if you have anything you'd like to share, we'll share out the transcript, the chat transcript, but we're going to strip the names out when we share that, along with the stuff that folks shared in Slido. That will also be anonymized. So if you did share something and you just don't want to share it at all, please let us know. We're assuming that Chatham House rules could apply reasonably here to sharing all the incredible insights and comments that came up in chat, including any highlights that came up from your group sharing that you would like to add to that transcript now in chat. While you're doing that, I'm going to turn it over to Tema. Tema, of course, has a new website to announce, but also we have garnered a nice contribution to her group. So Tema, would you mind sharing a bit about Earthseed Land Collective? And there's this theme of kind of the money going back to the land.
Yes, yes. So Earthseed Land Collective, I'm realizing I'm not prepared to tell you when they started. I think they've been on the land for almost 10 years now. It's a group of people here in Durham, near where I live, many of them are my good friends. One of them was part of the DR Works collaborative that I was part of for many years. And they are Black and brown people, families, in the broadest sense of that word, that are creating intergenerational relationships and skill sharing on and in and with the land. And they work for liberated food sovereignty. They are do a lot of work with culture and art. They're a community space, do mutual learning, all based in really deep values of indigeneity, respecting indigeneity, respecting racial justice, gender justice. It's just, they're doing very, very hard work, both hard work on the land and hard work developing this collective and cooperative. And I really, really encourage you to go to their website and check them out. They're, I think, a role model for people doing this kind of work around the country. And so I spoke with them on email today, and they were very, very grateful for the contributions that you're making. And if you go to the website, you can continue to make contributions to them there. So thank you very, very much.
We're to close with the video. Kema, if you have a second, there's been a question of, is the name Earthseed a connection to Octavia Butler's work?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I think there was a last slide that I was going to, from the website, that I wanted to share. Yeah. So I wanted to, on the website, you'll find this collage. And what I say is that the website is an expression of my commitment and our commitment to a world where we can be free, which was what we talked about. A world where we can come home to ourselves in all the ways we are meant to show up to ourselves, all the ways we want to be, unchained by the toxic conditioning and constructions of divide and conquer that white supremacy culture and those attached to profit and power prefer. And this collage is a result of a regular meditation practice that I have, which I use to work with my conditioning and face my fears and face what needs to be changed. And during one of those sessions, my mother, the woman on the left, came to me. She died at age 95 in 2009. And she gave me these very clear instructions. She said, be loved, pay attention, don't be afraid, and find the others, meaning others who care about this. And the website and my life at this point is my attempt to live into these instructions in the service of our mutual liberation. And I also say that I claim only the intention, not the result. So thank you so much for coming today and for hearing from all these other very wise people. And I hope that you find the website of use. That's my greatest desire. So thank you. And we're going to close with this beautiful song by Solomon Burke, backed up by the Blind Boys of Alabama.
Oh, I don't think we're hearing this sound.
Yeah, Melissa, I think you need to unmute yourself, or whoever's playing the video. There you go. Nope.
We'll send out a link.
Okay.
Okay.
You should really listen, folks. It'll make you feel good.
It'll be a good follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you everyone for joining. As Melissa noted, we'll share a number of things in a follow-up, including some upcoming events that are very closely related to this, and this video, as well as the recording and some of the outputs from Slido in the chat. All right, how about we all unmute and give each other a very human goodbye. And
Bye, all. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you all.
Say goodbye, Phil.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dan, was that your dog?
Yes. Perfect timing. He was like, hi.
Hard to leave.
Right. What was the name of the song? None of us is free.
None of us are free.
Thank you all for holding this space. It was really, really wonderful to be with you. Lots of great learning and sharing. So much gratitude. Have a great day.
Thank you, Shalene.
Good to see you, Shalene. Bill, we got a whole Ashoka crew here, huh?
Yeah, yeah. And Diane, hey, you rock. I wrote down, relationships at the intersection of love, justice, and power, which is exactly what I'm having to be focusing on at the moment.
Okay.
Some of your other comments, I was writing everything, but I really want to just tell you, I just wanted to shout out to you.
Great.
Just thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great. Yeah, to all of you, but it's a yes, and yes to all of you. Thank you so much for and for all the work you've done, right? The groundbreaking work in this field. It's terrific.
Really powerful.
All right. Thank you, Bill. And good morning, Paul.
Cheers, brother. Thank you very much. It was very, very informative, guys. Big araha from New Zealand. And
All right.
Tuesday's great. Tuesday is great.
Kia ora, bro.
Take care. God bless.
Bye-bye.